The Watership Down Podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There definitely will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the much-delayed Watership Down Podcast, episode 206, in which we will be looking at the portrayal of Hazel from the 1999 TV series to the 2018 Netflix miniseries. But first, a correction from the last episode. At one point, I accidentally referred to the century since Watership Down was published rather than the half-century, which may have been confusing. I've also had a note from Hazel member Apuji pointing out that John Hurt also played Aragorn in the 1978 animated film of Lord of the Rings, after I referred to the book in the last episode. Next, some sad news for which I'm grateful to Hazel member Eric Steps. The actor Clifton Jones, who voiced Blackavar in the 1978 film, very sadly passed away on the 4th of June, aged 87. If you want to see him in action, his best-known role was as David Kano in the 70s British science fiction series Space 1999. My heart has joined the 1,000, for my friend stopped running today. Rest in peace, Clifton Jones. Lastly, I must apologise for the delay in this episode, the last of the marathon of biographies of the 11 rabbits that leave the warren at Sandalford in the original novel. My working hours suddenly and unexpectedly increased a few weeks ago. While this is a good thing for me in the long run, it has meant a lot less time for the podcast, especially with such extended episodes. Moving forward, the episodes will be getting a lot shorter as we move on to the graphic novel, so we should get back to an episode every 2 weeks. Anyway, let's get back to Hazel. The portrayal of Hazel from 1999 to 2018. It is an unfortunate fact that in dramas, incompetence can make for a far more interesting story. Who wants to watch 2 hours of a leader just getting things right? Even in the original novel of Watership Down, Richard Adams made sure that the highly competent Hazel made a couple of wrong turns, I would argue. These being the Warren of the Snares and the raid on Nuthanger Farm. On both occasions he ignored Fiver's warnings and paid a price. But unfortunately, Hazel's level of competence is about to get even worse in the latest 2 film portrayals of Watership Down. I'm sorry to put a downer on proceedings at the outset, but perhaps it is best to use this as an exercise in remembering the high degree of competence of the original Hazel Ra. The first 1999 season of the children's TV series opens with Hazel and his companions already at the River Enbourne. Only later are we given any real clue as to why they ended up there. After Hazel is given a quick vision of the kind of home they should be looking for from Fiver, the arrival of the dog prompts him and Bigwig to undertake a comedic distraction exercise using a hollow log. With everyone crossing the river to safety, Pipkin and Fiver's log starts drifting back towards the dog. It is left to Bigwig to rescue them. They spot the high hills in the distance and realise where they should be headed. Then they rapidly reach Nuthanger Farm, where Hazel agrees to a Flavor raid after dark, having pointed out the dangers of cats, dogs and humans. Shouldn't the priority have been to get to Watership Down as soon as possible? However, the raid does end up with them rescuing the injured Keehar from the cat, along with his companion Hannah the Mouse. And so they arrive on Watership Down with Keehar. Once on the down, Hazel has to defend Keehar's presence and also start asserting that the only doe, Blackberry, should not be doing all the digging. Keehar does not help his cause, and Hazel and Bigwig even square up over the issue of digging. This Hazel is not so good at de-escalating, and seems to realise this as the issue is settled over a game of bobstones. He even wonders if he should give up the leadership to Bigwig. However, his ability to adapt to changing circumstances gives him a clear advantage. The first of these is the luring of a weasel into the passages beneath the warren, which is accomplished using Hannah the Mouse rather than Bigwig's unnecessary offer to sacrifice himself. Hazel even orders him pinned down. Hazel's use of other animal allies is thus vindicated early on. And then Holly arrives on the down with his terrible news from Sandalford. But he has also left Pimpernel at another warren, and it is not a difficult decision for a small group to go there to bring him back to Watership Down. This warren is, of course, the bypassed warren of the snares, where events unfold in a truncated manner on the same kind of scale as the 1978 film, except that this time Strawberry is present to show Hazel the shapes, as is Silverweed to terrify Fiver. Hazel quickly realises something is wrong here, unlike complacent Bigwig, whose snaring follows. After Strawberry joins them, Hazel makes the unwise choice to back an assault on this strange warren. Fortunately, the clear insanity of Cowslip deters them, and they leave with Strawberry. Once on Watership Down, Hazel is faced with a Strawberry who is in no hurry to make amends for his previous warren and a resurgent rebellion against Buck's digging, with Bigwig's excuse being a nearby dangerous warren he has heard about, called Ephrafa. Hazel does not provide adequate leadership, resulting in Blackberry having to confront Bigwig herself. Eventually, Hazel decides to split the warren into two teams, diggers and patrols. Strawberry manages to cause a collapse after becoming over-enthusiastic about digging, afraid Hazel will send him away. Hazel assures him this will not happen. And eventually Bigwig arrives back agreeing that digging should be the priority, having encountered the Afrafans. Hazel is beginning to make some headway as a leader. And now, having succeeded in establishing his new warren, this Hazel acts recklessly. As in the book, he comes up with a plan to get Does out of Ephrafa. He journeys to the far closer Ephrafa with just Fiver, Bigwig and Keehar. Arriving at Ephrafa, Hazel sees the doe Primrose, who is basically Heisenthale, and for the first time romantic love enters the Watership Down storytelling universe, and with it, a seeming drastic lowering of Hazel's IQ. The plan seems to be to just get Primrose and Blackavar out of Ephrafa, and apparently Hazel's plan for doing this, after a cryptic vision from Fiver, is for him and Fiver to surrender themselves to the Ephrafa Owsla. Once in a cell with Primrose and Blackavar, Fiver seems irritated with Hazel, understandably, but Hazel apparently only cares about being back with Primrose. For his pains, he ends up under threat of death from Woundwort unless he reveals the whereabouts of his warren. It is only the lucky stroke of Fiver having a terrifying vision of Woundwort's past, during which he names Darkhaven, that scares Woundwort for long enough for them to leave, aided by Bigwig and Keehar making it seem Ephrafa is surrounded. They manage to escape thanks to a train on the Iron Road, but Hazel has made a completely unnecessary enemy long before there was any need to, and they have rescued no one. It is only now that Hazel decides upon the raid on Nuthanger Farm. He takes just Fiver and Pipkin with him. Fiver seems to think Hazel is just after another doe for himself, and the raid does indeed result in just the rescue of Clover, as well as an encounter with a cat, and, of course, in Hazel getting shot. Keehar and Fiver find him, and his recovery is remarkably quick. And now it becomes clear that he intends to return to Ephrafa to rescue Primrose. And so we move on to Hazel's attempt to get rabbits out of Ephrafa that more or less corresponds to the original story. With Bigwig's new Owsla proving they are ready by jumping on Hazel, they set off for Ephrafa. Only this is an Ephrafa where Hazel has already made an enemy of Woundwort. This mission, remember, is purely for rescuing one doe who Hazel fancies and Blackavar, a buck. And at Ephrafa, Vervain has already noticed the connection between Hazel and Primrose. Hazel is doubting himself already, getting irritated that Fiver isn't having visions to guide him. He even says that trying to be right all the time gets tiring. In which case you might argue this Hazel should be feeling wide awake. On the way to Ephrafa, an encounter with a fox and the Ephrafa Owsla causes tension between Hazel and Bigwig again. This ends with Bigwig taking charge and sarcastically asking Hazel if his orders meet with his approval. But the others do look to the angry Hazel for confirmation. Arriving at the River Test, they rapidly find the punt under a bridge, but have to remain well hidden as this Ephrafa posts sentries there. And then Bigwig unexpectedly leaves for Ephrafa, not as part of any plan. There seemingly was no plan. Bigwig manages to let Hazel know what he is up to when he goes to the bridge to inspect the guard. Then Hazel leaves Blackberry with the punt, while the others make for Ephrafa while Keehar distracts the guards. Hazel learns from Bigwig that they will escape at sunset. As Bigwig manages to get the two escapees out, Hazel and Primrose, having a romantic moment, delays their escape and Hazel is spotted. Luckily, they get to the punt, and Hazel helps distract the furious Woundwort until it floats away, leaving Woundwort floundering in the River Test. And there, effectively, we leave any semblance of the original plot. Woundwort will attack Watership Down, twice in fact, once at the end of Season 2 and again at the climax of Season 3. but the remainder of the action will lie very much outside the original story, and a lot of it will not involve Ephrafa. Interestingly though, the Ephrafa part of the story will involve an element that is original and also quite effective, the cultivation of a friendship with Captain Campion, largely by Hazel, that will be absolutely crucial to the survival of this Watership Down. On Watership Down, Fiver has a vision that Redstone Warren, which Primrose is from originally, has been abandoned. Hazel sets off with Primrose to find out what has happened. On their way, he has to rescue her from a canal when she falls in. During the rescue, he says he wants them to have as many children as Ella Ra. We are treated to a montage showing their romance as the song Thank You Stars plays, sung by Kerrison Matthews. They arrive at Redstone to find it indeed abandoned, except for old Captain Broom, who tells them a sickness wiped out the Warren. Hazel invites him to join them at Watership Down. Arriving back, Hazel has to reassure Fiver his vision of Redstone was right, after a cruel remark from Hawkbit about his visions made him withdraw from the Warren. Hazel also announces that he is going to be a father. After the birth of his and Primrose's litter, Hazel agrees to a raid on Nuthanger Farm in which they tangle with both the cat and dog there, and Fiver ends up trapped. Fortunately, Hazel comes up with an effective plan to free him. The discovery of the geologically implausible cave system under the Warren on Watership Down leads to Hazel becoming lost with Fiver and Hawkbit. However, the discovery that it leads to a secret entrance on the river close to Ephrafa opens up new possibilities to Hazel. As Woundwart's obsession with finding Hazel's Warren increases, Hazel plans to lay false trails to deceive the Ephraffans as to its location. And then, a chance encounter with the Ephraffans at a tropical greenhouse changes their fortunes. Captain Campion is injured by a bird of prey, and Hazel stays with him in the greenhouse, resulting in them being trapped overnight with a snake. Their temporary truce enables Hazel to work on Campion, who he realises is different from the other Ephraffans. By the time they are rescued the next morning, Campion has effectively been persuaded to become a traitor to Ephrafa. Via the secret river, Hazel leads a raid in which Campion is captured while on patrol so they can talk. However, Hazel's decision to trust him is thrown into doubt as there are hints he may be a double agent. After much cross and double cross involving Vervain, it seems Campion can be trusted, though not with the location of Watership Down yet. Season 1 closes with Pipkin being captured by the Ephraffans as Vervain shouts his ultimatum into the night that Hazel, Bigwig and Fiver must surrender for him to be returned. Hazel manages to meet with Campion to discuss rescuing Pipkin, and Campion says he will make sure the Ephraffans go no further than a set point at the place of exchange. Campion is good to his word, though Pipkin nearly ruins everything by not wanting to leave Hazel, who is forced to adopt straightforward ferocity in order to overcome this. With the help of local wildlife, they beat the Ephraffans and even get a chance to kill Woundwart, which Pipkin prevents. Hazel does not seem convinced by his reasoning afterwards, but he seems to understand his point about trying to be better than the Ephraffans. We now reach a period during which Hazel does not have to deal with the Ephraffans, as a result of which he makes some pretty poor decisions. First of all, when Hickory and Marigold arrive, having escaped from Cowslip's Warren, he agrees to their setting up their own new Warren at Redstone. These are two highly inexperienced rabbits who know the location of Watership Down, and Redstone was previously raided by Ephrafa, as we know from Primrose. Hickory soon has to be rescued from a traffic roundabout, which is achieved with no ideas from Hazel. And then comes Hazel's inspired decision for them to accompany Kihar on a trip back to the Pigvata by smuggling themselves into the luggage compartment of a bus, which just happens to be going the right way. This trip is Pipkin's suggestion, and should have been shut down straight away. This results first in their getting lost in a town market, before managing to get back to the same bus so that they end up at the coast, where they cannot find Kihar and end up stuck at the bottom of a cliff with the tide coming in. Fortunately, some puffins they have met have been helped by Kihar against his fellow gulls, so they help rescue the rabbits. Hazel says they will return home, which is the best idea he has during this expedition, but we never find out how they managed it. Hazel gets back to business with a raid on Cowslip's Warren to rescue the other rabbits who want to join the new Warren at Redstone, though this does make even more of an enemy of Cowslip, who promptly finds out the name and rough location of Redstone. And then Woundwort and Cowslip meet, a meeting that Hazel could have avoided. Campion meets with Hazel to say that Redstone will be attacked by Ephrafa. Fortunately, they manage to evacuate Redstone just in time, and Broom convinces the Efrathans that the warren was abandoned due to disease. Woundwort, convinced that Cowslip has betrayed him, sets off for his warren. Campion, out of misguided residual loyalty, saves Woundwort from a snare, but he had no business being there or knowing about the snares, so he is taken prisoner. After a brief foray to an orchard, in which Pipkin places Fiver in potential danger, but due to Hazel's bravery and compassion they end up with a new ally, Bark the Badger, it is time to get down to the business of freeing Campion. After Hannah the Mouse infiltrates Ephrafa, she confirms Campion is being starved. Hazel comes up with a plan to copy the trick that Elechrara used at his trial by making Vervain look insane by persuading their wildlife friends to act in implausible ways in front of him. The rabbits of Watership Down join in with the mayhem, with hilarious results, and Campion ends up being made captain of Owsla, while Vervain is enslaved. Hazel offers to tell Campion the location of Watership Down, but he refuses. His place is at Ephrafa. And so Hazel returns to incompetent mode, as he leads out an expedition to find Flayra for the Festival of Frith in the middle of a very harsh winter, so they can feed their wildlife guests. This is not dealing with priorities. After an encounter with a fox, and with Bigwig having fallen through ice on a frozen pond, they end up in a maze at a human place, where they meet another warren that appears to accept food from humans. Fortunately, these humans turn out to be rabbit-friendly, and their mission succeeds, but not because of any genius on Hazel's part. The following spring, 2 confidence tricksters arrive at Watership Down, posing as messengers of Prince Rainbow. To his credit, Hazel is not taken in by them, but after their lies nearly get Pipkin killed, he makes the error of being forgiving, offering to let them stay with their quick wits. They decline, and 2 deceptive rabbits who know where Watership Down is are allowed to leave, a very poor decision that fortunately seems not to place Watership Down in peril. And then the Down is invaded by sheep, after a storm, and Hazel has the clever idea of leading the sheepdog onto the Down to take them back. I've already made my feelings clear about this misappropriation of the climax of the original story. Hazel then has to deal with Bigwig getting a bit overbearing, especially at a celebration at Redstone Warren, as a result of which they nearly lose Hannah the Mouse. However, she ends up rescuing Bigwig, which reinforces Hazel's philosophy about making allies and recognising each other's strengths. And so, back to Ephrafa, where Vervain, by chance, finds the secret entrance to the warren on Watership Down. Campion decides to find out if Vervain was right, and meets with Hazel in the caverns to warn him, before getting a brief taste of life on Watership Down. The attack on Watership Down starts through the caves. Hazel has planned to cause a collapse if this happens, but first he is forced to fight Woundwort himself. Unsurprisingly, he comes off worse and has to be rescued by Bigwig, who has to be rescued by Campion, thereby making his treachery clear to Woundwort. And then the tunnel begins to collapse. Out of misguided loyalty, Campion saves Woundwort, apparently being crushed in the process. And Season 2 ends with the conflict with Ephrafa unresolved and Woundwort still alive. With the caves permanently sealed off and Campion apparently dead, Season 3 opens with Hazel making the most shocking decision of any of his portrayals: to wipe out Ephrafa. To his credit, he says there is nothing glorious about war before the attack. He then gives a rousing speech to their assembled wildlife allies. Sneaking up on Ephrafa via the bridge, Hazel insists that the attack take place just as a storm breaks in order to maximise confusion. Even Bigwig is impressed with his ruthlessness. The massacre of Ephrafa is made palatable for children with shots of Ephrafans just being knocked about, and we see many innocent Ephrafans escaping. But the coding is very clear, and there is one apparent death, mainly caused by an apparently cooperative bolt of lightning hitting the tree of Ephrafa, which collapses, that of Woundwort himself. After the battle, Hazel looks grim, saying he wishes there had been another way, and as they leave, we see Woundwort has survived. I cannot help coming back to the unfortunate coincidence that this episode was first aired on September the 11th, 2001. The surviving Ephrafans, including former Owsla, are allowed to live on Watership Down, but things are understandably tense between the Watership Down Owsla and former Ephrafan Owsla. And the Ephrafans who are not Owsla instinctively act subserviently. Captain Moss, the de facto leader of the Ephrafans, works with Hazel to try and keep the peace, but Bigwig does not help, Moss says he doesn't want to be their leader, to which Hazel replies he didn't either. The mutual decision is eventually made that the Efrathans will leave and make a new home elsewhere, and we do not hear from these Efrathans again. With peace returning to Watership Down, Hazel takes a relaxed approach to the comedic training of junior and senior Owslers, unlike Bigwig. However, unknown to Hazel, both Vervain and the mutilated Campion are still alive, and Pipkin is secretly helping the latter to recover. And then a clear prophecy from Fiver makes Hazel realise that Woundwort is still alive. Hazel decides to test the junior Owsler to see if they are ready to patrol alone, a test they pass with cunning and deception against the senior Owsler. And then they arrive back from their first lone patrol, apparently being pursued by a hawk. Only all is not as it seems. This young hawk, a member of the Allil, is one they have rescued and befriended, who was imprinted on rabbits and Kihar, and is the latest ally of Watership Down. He is called Scree. None of them know, not even the hawk, that its mother was killed by Woundwort. On their way back from a hazardous visit to Redstone Warren, the Watership Down Owsler encounter a smell that should not exist, that of Campion. Pipkin, confronted by the doe Blackberry, who loves Campion, tells all, making Hazel aware that he is still alive. Hazel and Bigwig remain behind to find Blackberry, who ran off on hearing that Campion was still alive, but there is a human hunter about. Managing to avoid him, they find Blackberry. She has met Campion, but he is very changed mentally as well as physically. There is a comedic interlude in which Kihar brings his girlfriend Gluck to Watership Down, before eventually deciding to leave with her, as she doesn't fit in, despite Hazel's attempts to teach her how to. In any case, they now have Scree the Hawk to take his place, though Hannah the Mouse is not best pleased about this. Elsewhere, Woundwort has been exploiting the rabbits of Redstone Warren, helped by Vervain, and Campion has arrived at a place called Darkhaven. None of this is known to Hazel, nor the dark deal between Woundwort and Cowslip to see Redstone destroyed in exchange for the psychic silverweed being given to Woundwort. Hazel and the others arrive at Redstone just in time to see its destruction by humans building a road, and they manage to get the rabbits of the Warren rescued just in time. And now Hazel's priority becomes the concealment and defence of Watership Down against Woundwort and whatever army he may try to muster. Hannah the Mouse asks if there's anything she can do, but Hazel tells her that there isn't since Kihar left. Together they had been very useful, with Hannah riding on his back, but now she seems of little use. How wrong Hazel is. For it will be Hannah who saves Watership Down, rather than this version of Hazel. Hazel learns that Blackberry and Primrose have left. He assumes they have gone to track Woundwort and Vervain, and leaves to find them with Fiver and Bigwig. They find the two does just as a patrol from Darkhaven does. Campion is part of this patrol and tries to help them, but Blackberry allows herself to be captured. Campion manages to let Hazel know that Woundwort is now at Darkhaven before they just about get away with Primrose. And now Hazel knows exactly what they are up against. Woundwort has returned to the dreadful warren he originated from, and plans to lead them against Watership Down. The priority now is to rescue Blackberry, but then there is another problem. Fiver becomes terrified, saying that Silverweed has seen the warren on Watership Down through his eyes. Woundwort not knowing its location is their only advantage. So now the priority is to get Silverweed out of Darkhaven before he sees any more. Hazel also speculates that the psychic link between him and Fiver could prove useful, but Fiver cannot return to Watership Down unless they do get Silverweed out. The sight of Darkhaven, when he first sees it, shocks Hazel. Fiver has taken over Silverweed's mind and makes him run from Darkhaven. However, Campion and Blackberry, who also emerge, insist to Hazel that they are staying at Darkhaven. He doesn't understand why, but there is no time to argue. Back at Watership Down, Silverweed seems freed from Woundwort's grasp and becomes a happy member of the Warren. When Spartina, the Darkhaven doe, infiltrates Watership Down by pretending to be unconscious, Hazel suggests getting Silverweed to sense what she is really about. But once in Watership Down, she intimidates Silverweed so that he says she is harmless. Meanwhile, at Darkhaven, Blackberry is told by Campion that he didn't have time to warn Hazel about her. Meanwhile, Spartina learns the exact location of Watership Down. She promptly tries to escape, but is captured. In the honeycomb, Spartina confesses to being a spy, but says that seeing Watership Down has made her change her mind. With the help of Silverweed, Hazel is convinced she is telling the truth, and she is released to go and try to save Blackberry, who was a hostage for her safe return. This seems to be genuinely the reason she tried to escape. And then, as they travel to Darkhaven, Fiver has a vision that suggests Darkhaven will only be defeated by someone giving their life rather than by force. Hazel makes the difficult decision not to try to save Campion or Blackberry. Protecting their warren has to be the top priority now. Fiver keeps repeating his latest vision as defences are built on Watership Down that are very human in character. The wildlife allies of Watership Down begin to assemble, and Scree the Hawk turns up as a substitute for Keehar. Hazel, with Hannah's help, realises that Campion will be leading the army of Darkhaven to Watership Down in order to keep Blackberry and Spartina alive. He looks very sad, and Hannah realises it is time to make her unexpected contribution to the defence of Watership Down. A bat attack gives Blackberry, Campion and Spartina a chance to get away. After nearly drowning in the river and being rescued by Scree, Campion at last arrives properly on Watership Down, where he confesses to Hazel about leading Woundwart's army there. But Hazel says he understands. And so the battle begins. Hazel Ra orders the first wave of attacks, during which Scree is injured. This is followed by rolling boulders down the slope. This is followed by 2 waves of wildlife attacks, but the Efrafans are still advancing, and the hand-to-hand fighting starts. The Efrafans are eventually repulsed for now, and everyone rests in the honeycomb. Hazel is in despair about their prospect, but Primrose urges him to give them all hope. This he does with a Henry V moment, inviting anyone who wants to abandon Watership Down. And of course, no one does. The next day, at a council of war, Bigwig offers to challenge Woundwort to single combat, and Hazel accepts, much to the disapproval of Spartina, who has lived in the brutal warrior society of Darkhaven. She is also falling for Bigwig. But Campion points out that Hazel knows only Bigwig has any chance against Woundwort. Hazel listens to the fight from a distance. He hears the cheers, and sees Woundwort raise his paw for the killing blow. He closes his eyes sadly. The next attack comes that night. After an attempt at repulsion, hand-to-hand combat starts again, but it is not good. Hazel orders them to fall back to the second line of defence. As the fighting continues, Hazel orders them to fall back to the warren. Finally, he orders them underground for a final stand. He faces down Woundwort, and, after Woundwort tells Hazel that he is a bringer of doom in the name of the Black Rabbit of Inlay, Hazel tells Woundwort he is a windbag. They begin to fight, a fight Hazel cannot win, and then something extraordinary happens. As Hazel is thrown to the ground, a storm begins. The army of Darkhaven begin to be lifted into the air. Hazel retreats terrified into the warren. Out of the storm, the Black Rabbit of Inlay appears, and with a final cry of defiance, Woundwort and his entire army are gone. It is over. But it is not Hazel who has defeated Woundwort. It is a mouse, and the magic she fetched from a hedge wizard some time ago. Magic that Silverweed stole from her during the battle. At the time, the despairing Hannah thought he had switched sides again, but he had just decided to sacrifice himself instead of her. Just as Bigwig returns, having somehow survived his fight with Woundwort, Hannah cries out Hazel's name. And they see Silverweed, who is very old now. And so this version of Watership Down ends with Hazel still young, as another brave rabbit prepares to end his days on Watership Down. In the 2002 BBC radio play, Hazel is represented as being basically the Hazel of the book. One or two differences are worth mentioning, though. When they depart from Sandalford, he says there are "chrair" of them, meaning he is aware there are more than 4. And when Hazel is shot, he gets himself to the ditch at the foot of the hill, where Keehar finds him, not Fiver. He shares more of the plan with the others on the way to Afrifa, and during the siege of Watership Down, Fiver, in his trance, gives Hazel far more of a ready-made plan for using the dog to defeat Woundwort. In the 2016 BBC radio play, Hazel is again well represented in comparison with the book. He seems to have fewer misgivings about the Warren of the Snares than in the original, and he supports Strawberry wanting to add a great burrow to the pre-dug warren they find on Watership Down. There is only one expedition to Nuthanger Farm, on which only Blackberry accompanies Hazel. And at the end of the story, Hazel and Fiver are still alive and speak with Hazel before his appointment with what seems to be El Khairar, albeit with glowing red eyes. And so we come to the most recent portrayal of Hazel on film or TV, the 2018 Netflix miniseries. When we first meet Hazel, he is above ground searching for Fiver at Sandalford. He finds Fiver underground having a bad dream and takes him above ground where they see Dewdrop, Hazel's initial love interest in this version. One might argue that this is more realistic than the apparent celibate Hazel seems to be in the original novel, though not in Tales from Watership Down, where Hazel has become his mate. Hazel tries to persuade her to join them leaving Sandalford, and is sad when she says no. Later he delays their departure, waiting to see if she will join them. Again, his IQ seems to have dropped a little because of a doe. From the very start, Hazel is given a far more hard time by the more aggressive Bigwig. However, at first he shakes this off, as when he is put down for being called Hazel Ra just after the ridiculous pursuit down the River Enbourne by the Sandalford Owsler. But later, at the road, he reacts more angrily when Bigwig patronises him for not knowing about roads. And then Fiver, in a poignant moment, spots Watership Down into the distance in the rain. Some of the downcast group of rabbits look towards Bigwig for what to do, but when Hazel says that is where they will head for, they all follow. As the rabbits rest later in an abandoned church, a group of crows arrive. Hazel decides he will try to speak with them, which proves to be a very bad idea, as they are immediately attacked. After this, Bigwig is especially angry with Hazel, and when he tries to say they should carry on when Bigwig suggests resting, he is rounded on and told how little he has actually contributed. Hazel is utterly crestfallen after this, convinced he has failed as a leader, because Bigwig, for all his obnoxiousness, has a point here. Only Fiver comforts him. And then a strange rabbit called Cowslip arrives, and this weaker Hazel deliberately disagrees with his brother and says they should accept hospitality at his warren. With Hazel's authority restored a bit by this political act, he leads them to the new warren, where he leads the introductions before being accosted by an excitable Strawberry as Fiver tries to tell him about his misgivings. Hazel is making excuses for all of the points Fiver raises and allows Strawberry to give them a tour, during which they come to the strange crystals in the floor that make the 1999 TV series still the only one to visually portray the shapes of the book. Hazel notices the spider's web across the entrance to a burrow Strawberry calls into, but seems not to draw any conclusions. He is awoken the next morning by cries of Flayra. Going outside to feed on the mysteriously left food, Hazel sees Fiver some way off on his own. And when he tries to speak with him, it results in an argument that provokes Fiver into telling Hazel the shocking truth that it was Dewdrop, the doe he fancied, who told the Sandalford Owsler about them leaving. This is too much of this love-lorn Hazel, and in a shocking moment he pins his brother violently to the ground. We have now departed completely from the Hazel of the book, who would never have acted in such a way. Once underground, Hazel hears strange chanting from the space with the crystals as Bluebell tells a story. And then Silverweed terrifies Fiver, who bolts outside. As Hazel tries to deal with Fiver, this time it is he who gets pinned down by an enraged Bigwig, who then saves the day by getting snared. In the presence of a genuine emergency, Hazel's leadership abilities come to the fore. He acts on the little information he can glean from Bigwig, and the peg is dug out. He also displays a knowledge of how snares kill by telling Bigwig not to struggle, which misses the point of how a snare would still kill talking rabbits. With Bigwig apparently dead, Hazel tries to be practical, and then Bigwig revives. Hazel goes to lead them all away before a man arrives, and then a Strawberry who hasn't just lost her mate begs to join them, and Hazel shows his merciful side. For a moment, Fiver is in charge, as he tells them Watership Down is their home. Passing Nuthanger Farm at the end of their journey, Hazel manages to notice hutches, and in particular a doe in one of them. Hazel, the Lothario, is back, it seems. And so the rabbits arrive at their new home on Watership Down, and are soon followed by the arrival of Holly, who warns them immediately that they are in danger from a new kind of a Lil called Ephrathans. Holly gives his account of the destruction of Sandalford to Hazel, alone it seems, by the dew pond that is on Watership Down in this version. This pond will come to symbolise death. Attempts are being made to dig a warren, but Bigwig says they need does for this. It is pointed out that Hazel saw a doe at Nuthanger Farm, but he says they are not going back there. This Hazel doesn't want to go near humans. and then Keehar arrives. But this Keehar is nowhere near as amenable to helping them, which leads to further tension as Bigwig tells Hazel they will be fighting if they don't get does. And here it has already started between Hawkbit and Dandelion. Reluctantly, Hazel agrees to go to Nuthanger with Fiver and Bigwig. The initial attempt to get the 4 does in the hutch out fails as they are interrupted by a cat that attacks Bigwig. Hazel is of course blamed for this failure by Bigwig, who says he has gone Tharn, and Hazel at last stands up to him, reminding him how one wrong decision could get them killed. This has been far too long coming. An uncertain Hazel quietly begs Fiver to try to see if they will succeed if they return to Nuthanger. The eventual answer is a cautious yes. Stupidly, Hazel sets off back to Nuthanger Farm on his own, only to find the hutch with the does in gone. And so the Hazel who said he didn't want to go near humans goes through a cat flap and enters the farmhouse. Creeping through the house, past a sleeping cat, he finds the missing hutch and gets the does out with help from them. But then the awoken cat attacks. Hazel tries to find a refuge, but it is only Bigwig's arrival just in time that saves the day. This Hazel is very brave, it cannot be denied. Unfortunately, he does not think things through as much and buckles under pressure far too easily. A desperate run through the farmhouse ensues. One doe is recaptured by the farmer's wife. The rabbits escape through an upstairs window by sheer luck more than anything. Another doe is captured in the lane as she goes Tharn seeing headlights. Hazel tries to escape with Clover and is shot. In the culvert where he manages to hide, the injured Hazel has an out-of-body encounter with the Black Rabbit of Inlay. She assures him that he is not dead and there is nothing about death to be afraid of. If he remembers this, he will become a great leader. Well, it's about time. Bizarrely for Hazel, it is Clover who finds him first in a thick mist. She says she will fetch Bigwig. And when Bigwig arrives, it becomes clear that Clover has just been abducted by the Ephrathans. Hazel arrives back on Watership Down to find that Holly has led an almost accidental expedition to a large warren to the south that turns out to be Ephratha. It has been a bit intense. What's more, the new warren is dug mostly thanks to Strawberry. Overall here, Hazel has not had to decide much, but now he makes up for this. Motivated a little too much by the abduction of Clover, he announces they will leave for Ephratha at daybreak. On the way to Ephratha, this version of Hazel gives us another chance to see his lack of competence in comparison to the Hazel of the book. He argues that someone who seems unthreatening should infiltrate Ephratha, such as a storyteller. Bigwig has to actually argue that it should be him instead, a fighter. And he is absolutely right, of course. As I pointed out at the time we originally went through this section, it would be far more sensible to get someone strong straight into the Owsla, giving them the ability to roam freely in Ephratha. Hazel knows full well what Ephratha is like, so he has no excuse for this attitude. The only counter to this, which I didn't observe at the time, is that in this version of Ephratha, it only seems to be does who aren't in the Owsla there. All the bucks we see seem to be Owsla, except Blackavar. In any case, there are no practical alternatives to Bigwig, who will later risk exposure in Ephratha with his ridiculous storyteller cover, and Hazel has at least thought of using Keehar to help in the escape. And then Hazel sees a fox creeping up on them, and all planning goes out of the window for now. Bigwig leads the fox straight onto an Ephrathan Y patrol, and Hazel tells Keehar to find him and get him as close to Ephratha as possible. With Bigwig gone, Hazel starts to fall behind due to his injured leg, and they arrive at the River Test, right by the town of Overton. Hazel intends for them to meet Bigwig and the escapees at the railway arch the following night, but there is no sign of Keehar. With the others criticising the plan, Hazel shows his desperation, and in doing so, his main motivation. He is just really interested in getting Clover out of Ephratha. He even says please to them in a pitiful voice. So, let's be generous and say that this is a Hazel who thinks with his heart more than his head at times. That is still not the Hazel we know, and he is no leader. Of course, no escapees arrive, and the following day Hazel begins to be told they should give up. Keehar is still absent, and Fiver takes him aside to try to talk to him. Only Fiver then has a vision involving a red car that leads them all except Hazel on a wild goose chase into Overton, while the injured Hazel, effectively still no longer a leader, lies on open ground in a lovelorn despair. Returning from Overton, Fiver and Blackberry tell Hazel they need to go. Hazel says Clover didn't give up on him, so he can't give up on her. He begs Fiver to back him up, but he doesn't. Hazel resigns himself to failure, and they leave. There is no Keehar, no punt, and no plan. And then, as they reach the railway arch under stormy skies, they just happen to bump into Bigwig and the escapees. And then Woundwort arrives with his Owsler. And then Keehar makes a magnificent entrance, and the plan is back on. Hazel orders them all south as Keehar attacks the Efrafans, and he makes the one tactical decision he has had to make throughout this whole mission. They will get away from the Efrafans by going to Overton. This was, as I've said before, the true low point of this version of Watership Down, as it rides roughshod over the original story. But, to be fair to Hazel, in the circumstances he finds himself in, telling the group to head for a human town in a thunderstorm isn't a bad idea. The next day, on open ground right next to the town and still close to Efrafa, Keehar bids them farewell, and Hazel gives a rousing speech to both bucks and Efrafan does. And it is a good speech, all about it being better to have to fight to be free than never to be free. Only it is delivered, on open ground, in clear sight of a human town, and still close to Efrafa. I almost wished a kestrel would turn up when watching it, as a way of focusing minds, because this Hazel has simply not earned this kind of respect. And so they arrive back on Watership Down after an untroubled journey. Hazel and Clover, reunited, get to share a romantic moment on the Down before one of this version's most effective moments, as Clover, during a lesson in using smell, smells the approaching Great Patrol. Hazel is now fully back in charge and gives effective defensive orders before bravely going to speak to Woundwort. And when Woundwort names Slaley, or Bigwig, as their chief rabbit, Hazel shows a tactical awareness that is not made explicit in the book by not contradicting him. Later, in the Honeycomb, Hazel gives a brief Henry V-like speech about anyone who doesn't want to fight being free to leave, after Blackavar, who has experienced an Efrafan siege, urges this. Hazel then issues his battle orders. And the stalemate begins, which is new to this version of Watership Down, during which we see Hazel looking out at the Efrafans before pulling down the roof of his tunnel so that only two are left open. And then the battle proper begins, which is far more dynamic than in the book for a Netflix audience. Hazel gives two main orders during the fighting. First, to collapse the main tunnel and get the wounded to the Honeycomb, and then for all of them to retreat there after he is told Holly has been killed at one of the entrances. This is their last stand. And so we arrive at the Honeycomb of the book, packed full of rabbits, albeit some injured, listening to the digging Efrafans. And then there is digging from above. He orders them into the back burrow, which is to be sealed off. Clover tells Hazel she loves him. Netflix viewers go awe, while fans of the original book grind their teeth. Hazel and Bigwig are left in the Honeycomb for the final fight. Spotting Fiver, Hazel says what holds them together is unbreakable, and this sends Fiver into a vision about a rope. Coming round, he comes up with the plan instead of Hazel. Before leaving for Nuthanger, Hazel explicitly tells Bigwig to use the line about fighting for his chief when all seems lost. Hazel's chosen companions for this desperate mission are his brother Fiver and Blackavar. Dandelion, who would have been an obvious choice, is injured, and this version of Blackberry does not stand out as an obvious choice. Running north, they leave Blackavar for the final run to the Warren, at the base of the Down. Then, arriving at the farm, it is Fiver who chews the rope of the dog kennel, and Hazel, apparently now fully recovered from being shot, who will be the first runner. So it is Fiver who sees the cat approaching Hazel, and who is then caught by it. Reluctantly leaving his brother to his fate, Hazel leads the dog to the Down, before handing over to Blackavar. Only Blackavar proves not to be up to the job and goes to ground, meaning that Hazel effectively has to lead the dog the whole way from Nuthanger Farm to Watership Down. Pushed beyond his limits, Hazel literally begs, Frith perhaps, for his life as he leads the closing dog on the last stretch. And Bigwig, now above ground, defending the last entrance, gets the very satisfying moment of greeting him as Hazel Ra right in front of General Woundwort, who, seeing Hazel approach, mocks the lame rabbit he met earlier, and then sees the dog. It may not be very close to the book, but it is a change with some satisfaction, especially as a more aggressive Bigwig, himself at the end of his tether, openly greets Hazel as his chief, in front of Woundwort. Having gone to ground with Bigwig until the Efraffans are gone, Hazel now has to face the loss of his brother Fiver at the hands of the cat. But it is not so. Fiver arrives back to Hazel's delight with a strange tale of being rescued by a human girl. Some time later, Hazel sits by the pond with Clover. He seems older and has developed the habit of sleeping outside, it seems. Fiver comes to see him, just to spend time with his leader, his brother, his friend. And now Hazel has a third visitor, a black rabbit, who invites him to join her owsler. He looks towards his warren, but she says he doesn't need to worry about them and offers to show him what she means. Hazel Ra says he would be honoured. We see them reflected in the water. A ripple passes, and they are gone. In the sky, as we hear the tale of Watership Down start to be told, a vast rabbit-shaped cloud heads for the setting sun. So that is the last time we have seen Hazel Ra portrayed on film. He is a truly remarkable character, and the complexities of his portrayals have taken a lot longer to look at than for any other character in Watership Down. Such is his quality of character that for more modern audiences his level of competence has been deliberately dialed down, because while for those who enjoy the book his sheer competence is entertaining, in the half-century since his creation it seems that flawed incompetence can have greater entertainment value, and that's a real shame. For Hazel, who began as just another rabbit and through calm and measured leadership ended up the respected leader of a truly unique and innovative warren, should be an example to us all. Next time, we pause and look forward to what comes next in the Watership Down podcast.